It's an audiobook theater podcast. I am your host and writer behind 99geek.ca, Andrew Geczy, and this is being recorded on Sunday, January 17th, 2021. Sunday already. My goal in life has always been to write for television, but it's a goal I've had little luck so far in attaining. So instead I've resorted to self-publishing novels on Amazon, but writing the monthly chapters like episodes of TV shows that people can download at patreon.com/99geek. Every chapter is released in 4 parts, a teaser in 3 acts, and every month features a different book spanning both science fiction and fantasy and every genre in between. That's right, I wrote all the books featured on this podcast, working nights at a local gas station to make ends meet until recently when they fired me because they were a bunch of dicks. And I'm now living on unemployment insurance, lucky me. I live in what feels like a poverty nightmare, praying to God I managed to make it as a writer before the night shift cognitively destroys me for good. Actually, it's been about a month that I've been off night shift, maybe 2 months now, and it feels pretty good. I'm pretty much over that, which is nice because trust me, night's not fun. Year after year, life sucks. If only I could find an audience or an agent or help of any kind, but I have nothing, no backup, no support. I'm completely alone, pro bono, with nothing but my passion for telling stories, and I ask you not to judge me or my work or my production values too harshly. I'm doing the best I can with no money and no time. This week especially, please don't judge me too harshly because of the fact I'm going to yellow here. Let me lower that a little bit. The fact that, and I'm going even more into the yellow. I lowered it and it went up. I'm so good at this audio thing. I actually failed audio class back when I took media arts. But where was I? I've been up a long time. I haven't smoked. I've been trying to quit smoking cigarettes, and I'm currently on day 9 of being nicotine withdrawn. And it's been very intense. And this is my first time trying to write without any cigarettes, and it didn't go very well. It was like banging my head into the wall repeatedly over and over again. So that was less than fun. But I did manage to finally get this chapter done. Technically, it's still Sunday, so it's not late yet. Yeah, tonight we will be reading from phase 2 of season 1 of 99% Geek, a chapter of a book entitled Isabol Tseung Voice News. Remember, you can follow along at patreon.com/99geek or 99geek.ca. Chapters are somewhat standalone, but at least make sure you start on week 1 for the recap. This is not week 1. This is chapter episode number 5 of Isabol Tseung Voice News, entitled A Dance with the Wind. And so we continue with week number 2. The old woman spoke, her wrinkled, leathery face twisting with the anguish of emotion. She lifted her drink, taking a sip, but never taking her dark eyes off Isabel's face. Isabol Tseung sat across the table from the woman, and Alia sat between them. Everyone else stood around the bar, surrounding them in silence as they watched Isabel conduct her interview. Alia leaned back in her seat, and it made a loud creak. She cleared her throat as Isabel waited for her to translate. She says her son died for nothing, Alia told Isabel, her chair threatening to fall back as she hooked her foot under the table. But she's ready to die for him. Isabel winced and struggled to keep Greg's camcorder steady on the woman. Perhaps we can start with something a little more simple, Isabel said with a forced grimace. What's your name? Alia translated her words for the woman. Manjit Punjal, the woman said from underneath her hijab, her large, bulky coat still done up as if she didn't intend to be staying long. She took a sip from the warm beverage Haim had placed in front of her. And your son's name? Isabel asked, and again Alia translated. Latif. The woman spoke, her eyes not looking at Isabel or the camera. Latif Punjal. Kan emu sit sanawat. He was 6 years old, Alia translated for Isabel. Tell me about him, Isabel said softly. Manjeet took another sip as Alia translated. Wakan waladana tayibana. she said, putting down her mug and staring out between the boards of the boarded-up window beside them. He was a good boy. Can ihu be alrak? The woman spoke, waving her arms around. Hawal awak kan yakud. He liked to run, Alia translated, always running, here to there, all over the place. Kan yashi the akarish indama hadath hadha. He was out running when it happened. Isabel glanced at Ali in confusion. When what happened? The rebel leader only shrugged. Sakatat al-Kanabil, Manjit spoke, not waiting for the translation. The bombs fell, Alia translated, and as she did, Manjit continued talking. Alia could barely keep up. Struck their house, killing her husband and... Alia stopped to address the woman. Abnatan? She asked, and the woman nodded. Zuji Wabnatan! She yelled, pounding the table. Killing her daughter, her husband, and 2 daughters. Alia finished, and Isabel felt her stomach sink. She couldn't imagine the pain of a parent losing 2 children. Whose bombs? Isabel asked, a little confused. Were they ISIS? Your government? Manjit stared across the table at Isabel, unflinching, as Alia translated her words. Lakad kan alamakikun. She spoke with distaste. American, Alia repeated in English. Again, the woman started talking faster than Alia could translate. Apparently there was an ISIS agent in the next building. Her husband and 2 daughters were considered acceptable losses, and the hit was carried out. And the hat Hayati fi Tariq al-Yam, Manjit finished saying. Alia dropped forward in her chair. She says her life ended that day. What about her son? Isabel asked Alia. What about Latif? How did he take the loss? Alka Yalahim Bialama, the woman spoke, glancing around the room at everyone watching. America. Isabel could see people nodding their agreement even before Alia finished translating. He was angry, Alia said, and the woman kept speaking. Against America. He would run off with his friends into the bombed-out areas of the city. She heard many kids would play in those places, pretend to be hunting Americans like noble Iraqi warriors. Isabel understood. What did you tell a child asking you who to blame? What do you tell them when you know the answer is everyone? How do you tell someone the entire world is against them? You don't. You come up with scapegoats, because it was easy, because Americans really were to blame, at least for some of these people's pain. What point was there to look deeper than that? Of course, that kind of fanaticism made certain acts easy. It wasn't Americans that killed your last child, Isabel repeated. Latif, your son. Nam, Manjit said in Arabic. Askatat, hukam makut batuk al-kanabil thuma gadarat lilta. The Americans just dropped the bombs and left. Nusp hukmat jadidat, Manjit muttered. Kal anan Kalasna installed a new government and declared that we were saved, Alia translated. Ikna al-hukumat al-jadidat al-jadidat takun muhtamatan bihimayatina. But the new government wasn't interested in saving us, Alia translated. Manjit's stare bore down on Isabel, stripping her of her defenses. Lakat Rayat Mafelu Betifali. Isabel didn't think she needed the woman's words translated. She could read what the woman was saying with her eyes. You saw what they did to her son, Alia translated anyway. Yeah, Isabel said solemnly. She saw it every time. She closed her eyes. I saw. How tarif ma'nan? Manjit asked. You know what we are? Someone. How tarif manan? The woman continued to speak, not letting up as Alia spoke over her. Muslims, she means, Alia repeated in English. We're the people who suffer, who are asked to pay again and again in blood. And what is there to show for all of our suffering but hatred and bigotry from the rest of the world? It's not very fair, Isabel granted her. Even our own people turned their back on us. Alia translated as Manjeet spoke animatedly. And now our swimming pools are filled not with water but with the blood of our children. Alia went silent as Manjeet tapped her empty glass on the table and got up. Ishub and Yatawakaf. It has to stop, Alia translated. In Yatawakaf alamarhata nanjaha. The older woman continued to rant directly into Greg's camera. It won't stop unless we make it stop, Alia said, and the woman kept talking. It's time we stop waiting for others to come save us. The only ones who can stand up for ourselves are ourselves. Alia stopped translating as the old lady went silent, her eyes peering out around the room from under her hijab, sorry. Again, super tired, up all night. My apologies, that was almost offensive. Ladies? The young soldier Yashish called out from somewhere in the crowd. The people parted, giving Isabel line of sight with him at the bar, Yashish's attention firmly on his laptop screen. Is something the matter? Alia asked, abandoning the interview. Isabel turned off the camera. I've kept the military busy for as long as I can, Yashish told them, controlling his remote drones from there. But the caravan is coming up to a roadblock. We're about 5 minutes away from them learning there's no people in those trucks, and then their military is about 2 hours out from returning to the city. You really led them rather... Oh, sorry, wrong accent. You really led them rather far, Isabel remarked, impressed. Thanks, she said with a smile. 2 hours from the city was farther than they had expected the young techie to lead Omar's men. I'm just worried it isn't far enough. Scene change. Scene change. Scene change. Oh, it doesn't pick up my snaps. Well, that's sad. I have a thing that helps, like a filter that keeps the audio as clean as possible, and I guess it doesn't pick up snaps. Maybe if I talk about it. Did that help? I don't know. Anyway, where were we? This is very serious. Should not be making jokes right now. We're talking about kids dying and stuff. It's very sad. Corrupt government's very sad. Persecution, very sad. General Omar stepped from his truck, glancing around the desert wasteland that surrounded them. The wind picked up, and sand got in his mouth. He tried to spit as one of the soldiers yelled at him words he couldn't understand. He could tell that the man was distressed, but it was too windy for him to make out anything. What are you saying? Omar asked, loudly confused. Ib Antara Hadha, the soldier yelled at him over the sand. He wanted Omar to come see something. Omar glanced at his driver still in the truck. Get the president on the line, he told the soldier as he followed this man through the desert storm towards rebel convoy. Scene change. Scene change. Scene change. Saidi, a soldier said loudly, approaching President Salim Talak and striking a salute. Anna Atalaka, Mukala Matan Min Ashok. There was a call for him. Salim frowned. It couldn't possibly have come at a worse time. Kullahum ala Tazar, Salim told the soldier, certain it was his forces in the desert. They'd been at it so long out there, surely they could wait another 20 minutes. Ladaya lika mai Rais al-Wuzara. He had a meeting with the Prime Minister. Salim shut the door between himself and his man, and as he did, the Prime Minister spoke up from where he stood at the window. Yakul, li rijali, anak aitakadat, irajat, didi al-mutamaridan. The Prime Minister said, letting Salim know that he was aware of the fight he was raging against the rebel. Let me redo this. Prime Minister said, letting that should not be capitalized either. All right. I'm not going to repeat what he said in Arabic, but the Prime Minister said in Arabic, letting Salim know that he was aware of the fight that was being waged against the rebels that had been raged. Okay, again, I'm fixing this. Had been waged against the rebels. All right, let's try the sentence again. Blah, 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 the Prime Minister said, letting Salim know that he was aware of the fight that had been waged against the rebels. Sorry, that was incredibly disrespectful to the Arabic language. Surely he didn't know about the most recent operation. Salim had been quite certain he'd kept the lid shut on that. No, if anything, Prime Minister Bahim Abdulabadi was referring to the battle they had waged against rebels in the canyon, a battle that hadn't gone too well for them. Ak Bardak Ana Alunf un Yakun hu Allahal. Bahim said to Salim, I told you violence wouldn't be the answer. This is still the same guy. Akbatok un tadeni atahadat mahum, the Prime Minister continued. Kama tahadatat me al murasil. I told you to let me talk to them, as I talked to the reporter. يمكننا الحصول على ما نحتاج من الناس دون الحاجات إلى المواد. Prime Minister Abdulabadi finished. We can get what we need from the people without anyone needing to die. President Salim Talak smiled. Teber rihis al-huzba, Salim said, sounding kind of French, appeasing the leader with an empty platitude, while in his head he imagined slitting the man's throat and watching him bleed out on the rug. The man's objections to Salim's methods were getting tiresome. Salim had a suspicion the man's days in office were counting down, but perhaps that countdown hadn't reached zero quite yet. Sayakun min al-sib tatib lika, Salim told the president coldly. It would be difficult arranging a meeting between him and the rebels. Limadha? Bahim asked Salim. Why? Liana Quatina Tatarad Hilian Akrium Iabar Al-Stara Yala Buad Miata kilometer min huna, President Salim told Bahim, because our forces are currently chasing the last of them through the desert 200 kilometers from here. The Prime Minister turned his head towards Salim in surprise, his eyes widening. Ana rim ait metal ada alamar? I think I did it in the wrong voice. Ana aim ait metal ada alamar? See, totally different. I gave no such order. Al-Wazir al-Awal, President Salim said with a warm smile. Iadha atit fi kugli amir falan itma bil shay fi al-hukumati. Prime Minister, if I deferred to you for every matter, nothing in government would get done. The Prime Minister picked up a letter opener from the Prime Minister's desk. The President picked up a letter opener from the Prime Minister's desk, fiddling with it in his fingers. He could imagine jamming it into the Prime Minister's neck, killing him. Right there, and it would be over. Maybe the countdown was closer to zero than he thought. Of course, it would be easy to kill the Prime Minister with a gun, but the President didn't usually keep one on his person. He supposed he could borrow a gun from a guard, though that would be more likely to go well if he had the pre-thought to assign one of his most loyal guards on duty outside the room. Perhaps next time. The door to the Prime Minister's office opened, and the President gave the Prime Minister another warm smile before placing his letter opener back on his desk. Al-Sada, a Prime Minister's assistant said. A Prime Minister's assistant? Or the Prime Minister's assistant said, stepping into the room and addressing them both awkwardly. Ay, tija, yata jamais fi almatinati. Sirs, we have reports of some kind of disturbance in the city moving towards the gates of the palace. The Prime Minister peered out the window at the gates. Lava, la ara, shayana, he muttered. I don't see anything. The Prime Minister's assistant also handed the President a cell phone. It's General Omar, his head of national security said in English through the phone. I know you're with the Prime Minister, so I'll make this quick. The convoy was a decoy. I repeat, there's no one here. The rebels are still in the city. Did you hear me? President Salim heard Omar yell through the phone as it slipped from his ear and out of his grasp to clatter to the floor of the office. Scene change. Bum. Da-da-da-da-dum. Scene change. Bum. Da-da-da-da-dum. Scene change. Bum. Da-da-da-da-dum. Alia banged two pots together loudly as she followed Manjeet down the sandy Mosul street. She'd handed similar noisemakers to her squad mates, and then, following her example, they marched down the sides of the street, banging their pans together and making a huge ruckus. And in the center of the street, where Isabel was focusing her camcorder, this, by the way, this seemed entirely done while I was, this morning, after no sleep, losing my mind. So I apologize if this sucks, but let's get to it. There's nothing to it. Vogue. And in the center of the street, where Isabel was focusing her camcorder, Manjeet was taking slow but steady steps, shouting in Arabic at the top of her lungs. Lakad bakadna shiana ma, the woman yelled loudly in the street. Lakad fakadna alatfal walaba walusrat walasatika walhaba. Isabel didn't know what the woman was yelling, but the people of Mosul seemed to understand her just fine, poking their heads out windows and doors, some even stepping outside to see what it was all about. And it wasn't just an old lady and a squad of rebels. The rest of the people who had returned with Isabel and the squad from the desert were following in a mass about 10 strides behind Manjeet, waiting to see how the city reacted to her, giving their support from a safe distance. Manjeet yelled out into the streets. Someone from one of the surrounding houses, another older woman, with a bit of a hunched back and a disheveled hijab, hobbled out to Manjeet and began whispering to her. Manjeet spoke confidently and grabbed the woman's hand. They began walking together, hand in hand. Someone from the mass following behind them ran forward and grabbed Manjeet's other hand. More people came out of the houses and joined with them, and soon Manjeet had massed a group of easily 30 people, all yelling in Arabic, all marching with a purpose towards the government capital. And the bigger that crowd got, the more confident people felt to join in, and the faster it grew. It was almost like exponential growth. And the next thing Isabel knew, the crowd had formed with the 100 people following behind, and they were one massive train marching with one purpose. She's reminding everyone of what they've lost. Alia approached Isabel and translated a bit of what she was yelling, and telling them they don't have to take it anymore. The protest was really beginning to take on a life of its own, and Alia's squad stopped banging on their noisemakers. They couldn't be louder than the constant screams for justice anyhow. As they all approached the gates of the palace, Isabel was pretty sure she saw Naeem take off, likely to find a vantage point overlooking the scene. She also couldn't spot Yashish, although she saw one of his drones hovering over their heads and figured he was watching the skies. The crowd came across the gates of the palace, crashed upon them like water upon a rocky shore. Protesters slammed against the gates, pressing their weight against them, banging and screaming. Narid Likad May Rais Al-Wazara, Isabel heard Manjeet scream through the bars at the guard. Isabel tried to push her way through the crowd as she could, so she could keep her camera focused on the old woman who began the movement. But the reporter found it hard to get to her. The crowd was really surging. Scene change. Bum, bum, da, bada, bum. Scene change. Bum, bum, da, bada, 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 bum. Prime Minister Abdul Abadi opened the window to try to hear what the gathering protesters were yelling as they clashed against the gate. They heard someone yell. We want an audience with the Prime Minister. Yumkinuhum alusil yalai. The Prime Minister Abdul Abadi said. They can have it. President Salim Talak closed the window promptly. Latakun sakipana, he told the Prime Minister. Hanak tarikat headat apakat letaimul may mithul hada alasht ilenif wahi alkat. Do not be absurd. There is only one way to deal with a violent mob like that, and it's with force. Prime Minister Bahim Abdul Abadi glanced back outside at the unruly crowd growing below, getting louder and more chaotic before their eyes. Af tarid anak tarif afdal fi hati al-zuruf, the Prime Minister said at last. I suppose you know better in these circumstances. President Talak smiled deeply. Kalar, Rais Aruzara al-Hakim, he told the country's leader. A wise decision, Prime Minister. Things were working out better than Salim Talak could have hoped. This riot was only proving everything Salim had told the Prime Minister about his citizens. As long as they continued to misbehave, Salim didn't suspect he'd have any more problems getting the Prime Minister to sign off on his more extreme ideas. He would have to thank whomever was behind this riot once everyone was arrested and in his custody. He'd then make their deaths painful and slow. Maybe pour molten metal down their throats, or something else deliciously unspeakable. When it came to extreme ideas, President Salim Talak had no shortage of vision. And that is the end of week 2. That is the end of week 2. I hope you enjoyed that chapter. Let's do that thing where we just end before we ruin how well that went. Especially considering what a hard time I had putting it together. I hope you enjoyed that chapter. My name is Andrew Geczy. My brand is 99geek, found at 99geek.ca. I'm a writer writing monthly chapters of novels like episodes of TV shows, releasing them in 4 weekly parts, a teaser and 3 acts on Sundays on my Patreon page at patreon.com/99geek. At the end of the month, finished chapter is added to the PDFs attached at the bottom of every post. Finally, the finished books are self-published on Amazon. There's urban fantasy tales about a teenage girl turned into a vampire against her will, or a scorned lover investigating paranormal phenomena, or a journalist covering news and politics in the Middle East. There's a sci-fi story about people on a dying world trying to build a ship to a new one. There's a fantasy story about a fallen angel trying to stop the end of the world. And there's more coming. And it's all attached at the bottom of every post on the site in convenient PDF format readable on computers, tablets, ebook readers, and phones. I also have a geekly weekly blog and host video game playthroughs and matchmaking streams on Twitch. And eventually post them on my YouTube and Patreon pages. Want a break? So stay tuned and maybe subscribe. It's only $1 and the support you show will go a very long way, I promise. There are also higher tiers. Give $5 one month and you can name a character or location or suggest a thing you might want to see. Basically, you get to give a noun and then I promise to incorporate that noun into one of my stories somehow. Maybe not the same month you give the suggestion, but within one cycle of books guaranteed. No matter how crazy, you can't sabotage me. I promise. I promise. And you can keep giving nouns for every month you pay at the $5 tier. Or if you give $10, you don't get 2 nouns, but you can give a description. Describe the personality of your character or the look of your location or the importance of your item. For $10, you get a noun and a description. You can also give $1 towards supporting my efforts at video game streaming or my weekly blog. If you don't want to contribute or subscribe on Patreon, you can also give at paypal.me/99geek. And for a limited time, the same rules about suggesting a noun apply there. You can write it below your very contribution. I'm as poor as it gets, living paycheck to paycheck and sometimes starving. So I understand if you are too. Now I'm actually living off of employment insurance, which actually pays me more than my paycheck said, which goes to show how shitty minimum wage is. I don't want to take food out of your mouth, so your attention is enough. Say something, comment here, or at the very least, follow me on Twitter at Andrew Geczy or Instagram at WingcommanderIV, or email me at aldon@gmail.com, or you can fill out a contact form at 99geek.ca/contact. You can't do that. That doesn't exist anymore. Anyway, Live long and prosper. May the force be with you. Long live Marceline the Vampire Queen. We are the 99% Geek. Hopefully next week when I come to you with the next chapter, I will be feeling better. I won't have this crazy mind fog I've been feeling that people talk about. It's been insane. Honestly, even doing this, the only way I got through this podcast was me just kind of like barreling through it. I don't even really know what happened over the past 30 minutes. It was just kind of a blur in my head. That's my life right now, just kind of going through in a blur, trying to um, play the role until I start feeling normal again. And I don't know how long that's going to take. But I managed to make it through this week's writing without caving. I really thought I was going to cave, and I didn't. So I'm proud of myself on that. I'm also super tired and quite hungry as well. So I'm gonna go deal with those issues. And hopefully you enjoy this. Live long and prosper. And all the other things that I said. We are the 99% Geek.